actually going to make a different soup than you're making today, but we're going to do the same technique, at the same time with the same steps, but we're going to have two different soups. So I
Right.
kind of I wanted you to see that it's not so much the recipe and what's in it as far as like what the steps you need to take to get to the end result.
Mhm.
So yeah. And that's kind of what this is all about. A lot of people over my career always ask me like, what's your signature dish? What's your signature dish? And it's like, it's really hard as a chef or a creative person in general to come up with like, what is it that defines you and what you do? I mean, does anybody ever ask you that in the wine business?
Yeah, for sure. People are always like, "What's your favorite wine?" It's like, well,
Yeah. You're
different
like,
wines for
today
different
it's
occasions. Yeah.
exactly. So this is what I believe in really strongly is that when you take what you've learned, either from your friends, your grandmother, your environment, your life experiences, your personal taste, your travels, anything that has brought you to who you are today becomes a part of your cooking signature, right? So anytime that I give you or somebody else a recipe, I give two different people from two different life backgrounds the same recipe, and they're going to have differences. They are going to have slight differences because of the way that we are. We're humans. We're all different, right? We're not machines making it, and that, at least not yet. I really hope that
Yeah.
doesn't become the norm, right? So I think this is the way that you find your signature. So you take a recipe, you kind of just look at the ingredients and what it's really doing, and the ingredients are telling a story. They're basically telling a story, but the outline is still the same. It's still a book, right? So what this story is we're in winter, it's fall, or it's winter, and we've got the squash, and we've got some apple element, and we're really kind of telling that local Santa Cruz winter hearty story. With my soup, I had a lot of potatoes. I get my CSA box from Live Farms every week, and sometimes like the produce will kind of just like pile up in my house, and I have to like come up with all these different
Right.
ways to use it. And I was like, what sounds really good to me right now is I want to make some potato leek soup, but the process is still the same. It's still going to take the same steps to get to two different soups. So
Well,
um
I don't know
yeah.
if that's a picture of the soup or if that's just a picture of soup. Because I don't have like an immersion blender or anything.
Do
Just
you have a blender?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
been a while. We have a
Yeah, you know what?
Vitamix
It's
at
so
home.
funny. I thought about that. I was like, what I didn't put on
Yeah.
make sure you have a blender. That's okay. You don't need to have this blended, right? That's
Right.
like a process, that we can do. There's other ways we can do that.
Right.
I have a stick blender. I use it all the time. I highly
That was
recommend getting one.
Yeah, one of the things I was gonna ask as we go along the way was like, honestly, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have very little equipment, so if you have like an immersion blender, there's been more than one time I've needed. If there's like stuff that you know and love, that'd be cool. Honestly, this is like my only knife, and
Yeah.
it was just like a freebie, like in a free box, but it's like a nice, pressed handle or whatever.
As long as it's sharp, it doesn't have to be a fancy name brand knife. As long as it feels comfortable in your hand and
Yeah.
you like the way it feels, and you're connected to it in some way, you do need to make sure it's sharp. And when you pick things up, sometimes at the, thrift store, I do that too. I take it to a
No,
professional sharpener.
yeah, I'm into sharpening knives, so mine's just
Nice.
a paper test.
Perfect. Yeah, I can't sharpen knives. I have really expensive knives, and really I don't trust myself to
Right.
touch my knives. So I bring mine to San Francisco, Bernal Cutlery, or somewhere, locally. I usually try to avoid. But this is a picture of the actual soup that I took
Okay.
a while ago, and been messing around with food photography a little bit. But
Cool.
yeah, so where were we? So to that, with the knives, I wanted to let you know, and to answer your question about tools, an immersion blender is something I couldn't live without. I really use it all the time. It's
Do you have like one that you like? Have you used many?
yeah,
Like,
mine's ancient. Here, I'll show you what this one looks like up close. Um, this is just like a home version. It's plastic. It was
Yeah.
given to me like 20 years ago or something like that.
Okay.
And it's just, and it kind of detaches like this.
Right.
It's the company's Braun. There's a lot out there now. I've seen a lot of different kinds. You can spend a lot of money on one if you want to.
Right.
There's new ones out that look really cool. I'm like tempted to buy. They're like 200 some odd dollars, but
Right.
I'm not going to do it because this one's been fine for me. And like, I don't
Totally.
need that perfect blend. You know, I don't get a
Yeah.
Vitamix. I don't have a Vitamix at home. I want to someday, but I don't need it to be that, fine at home. In the restaurant, yes, but at home, not so much.
Right. And I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, a lot of this, not always, but oftentimes the equipment does do the same thing. It's just like buying into a name brand or not. But it's always nice to have nice things, but
Yeah.
you don't always need it. Or
For sure.
or the same good company that just isn't like the glitzy one does the same job. So for sure.
Yeah, that's true. And I'd say with knives, like I said, just pick something that feels good to you. There's so many different things out there. I prefer Japanese knives. This is a Japanese knife. It's like a really nice size. One thing that I find at home that's important, I don't like to use big knives at home because, first of all, most of us in Santa Cruz don't have a ton of space.
Yeah.
Right? We're working in kind of confined, smaller areas a lot of the time. And when you have a big old knife, it's just kind of in the way. It's taking up a lot of space. It's not really necessary unless you're like full-time chopping all day like that.
Right.
I have a stick blender. I use it all the time. I highly recommend getting one.
Yeah, one of the things I was gonna ask as we go along the way was like, honestly, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have very little equipment, so if you have like an immersion blender, there's been more than one time I've needed. If there's like stuff that you know and love, that'd be cool. Honestly, this is like my only knife, and
Yeah.
it was just like a freebie, like in a free box, but it's like a nice, pressed handle or whatever.
As long as it's sharp, it doesn't have to be a fancy name brand knife. As long as it feels comfortable in your hand and
Yeah.
you like the way it feels and you're connected to it in some way, you do need to make sure it's sharp. And when you pick things up sometimes at the, thrift store, I do that too. I take it to a professional sharpener.
Yeah, I'm into sharpening knives, so
Nice.
just a paper test.
Perfect. Yeah, I can't sharpen knives. I have really expensive knives and really I don't trust myself to touch my knives. So I bring mine to San Francisco, Bernal Cutlery, or somewhere, locally. I usually try to avoid. But this is a picture of the actual soup that I took, a while ago, and I've been messing around with food photography a little bit. But yeah, so. Oh, where were we? So to that, with the knives, I wanted to let you know, and to answer your question about tools, an immersion blender is something I couldn't live without. I really use it all the time. It's
Do you have like one that you like? Have you used many?
Yeah, mine's ancient. Here, I'll show you what this one looks like up close. This is just like a home version. It's plastic. It was given to me like 20 years ago or something like that. And it's just, and it kind of detaches like this. It's the company's Braun. There's a lot out there now. I've seen a lot of different kinds. You can spend a lot of money on one if you want to. There's new ones out that look really cool. I'm like tempted to buy. They're like 200 some odd dollars, but I'm not going to do it because this one's been fine for me. And like, I don't need that perfect blend. I don't get a Vitamix. I don't have a Vitamix at home. I want to someday, but I don't need it to be that, fine at home. In the restaurant, yes, but at home, not so much.
And I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, a lot of this, not always, but oftentimes the equipment does do the same thing. It's just like buying into a name brand or not. But it's always nice to have nice things, but you don't always need it. Or the same good company that just isn't like the glitzy one does the same job. So for sure.
Yeah, that's true. And I'd say with knives, like I said, just pick something that feels good to you. There's so many different things out there. I prefer Japanese knives. This is a Japanese knife. It's like a really nice size. One thing that I find at home that's important, I don't like to use big knives at home because, first of all, most of us in Santa Cruz don't have a ton of space,
Yeah.
right? We're working in kind of confined, smaller areas a lot of the time. And when you have a big old knife, it's like, it's just kind of in the way. It's taking up a lot of space. It's not really necessary unless you're like full-time chopping all day long and you're butchering chickens at home. Like maybe get yourself a 10-inch chef knife, but otherwise I prefer a 6-inch knife. And what I love about a Santoku is that it's pretty versatile. It's basically a chef knife and a cleaver kind of in one tool, right? So it's and you can also use it to like scoop things up from your your cutting board. The one that I'm going to be using today when we cook is this guy. This is my fave. This is a 9-inch, or maybe it's an 8.5. This is made by New West Knife Works. They're out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and I just think they're so cool. And it's like the guy studied in Japan, and it's like a whole story, and it comes with like a leather sheath and but I'm into knives. That's my thing. It's like,
for sure. I mean, yeah.
Knives. So I'm willing to drop a lot of money on knives. I had the horrible experience of having my knives get stolen one time.
Oh, no.
Yeah, years ago. And I actually had to start to build my collection again. And now it's kind of just, it's a lot less. I have way less knives, but they're really, really, really high quality.
Do you like those little divotty things? Does that help things not stick?
It does. I definitely find this knife is really great for like tomatoes, even onions or anything really that has a starchiness to it is going to want to stick to your knife. It helps a little bit, I wouldn't say it's crucial. I don't think that you must have it. My Santoku does not have it. It has a hammered steel situation just for like aesthetics, and maybe it's a little bit for the slippage. Maybe they had an intention for that. I'm not aware.
I was just curious because like I would never know, but you've obviously chopped enough things that maybe you had an opinion about it.
No, that's a really good question. And I think you can go either way. I wouldn't prioritize it in a knife. What I would prioritize in a knife, and here, what I'll do is I'm going to switch. I have a different camera set up for the cooking.
The overhead thing.
I'm going to switch perspectives so I can kind of we can start working on holding a knife and all of that. So let me just kind of switch over real quick. I'm going to do this. Oh, wait, I got to turn it on first. Also have, okay. I've learned this kind of the hard way. Like we have done so many of these that like have different camera angles and different things going on, and it's not, what's going on here? Hold on. What's going on? Right here. Huh? Oh, okay. Sorry, we tested this right before to make sure it was all good. And it's not working now. How wonderful is that? Okay, let's try this again. Sorry. Okay, so. Sarah. Wasn't it working before? Yeah, it was completely working before. My goodness. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Cool. Let me make sure it's focused.
Looks pretty good.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Can you see okay?
I can.
You can hear okay?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, perfect. So I want you to grab your knife. Show me how you hold it when you hold it.
Probably like this.
Okay. Perfect. That's exactly what you should be doing. Okay. So I never want to see this. When I see this, I get concerned. You never want to put your finger on top of the blade. This is a really common mistake that people make with knife handling. If you can kind of just tell the difference, like try it for a second and see.
Yeah.
It feels very unstable, right? Your
Yeah.
finger is going to make this blade wobble and be unstable. And it's also going to kind of get fatigued over time, right? So this is like the proper method of holding a knife. You want to make sure when you're choosing a knife that the ratio of like blade to handle and everything feels good in your hands, right? Does it feel like it fits? It should be like a shoe, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been told how to hold a knife, but I feel like that's just the natural way to do it. / like if you need to apply force, you can't really do it like this.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, then you're very intuitive and you really get it. Sarah, you want to pull the other camera angle just in case I need a top down? And my daughter, she's 16. She's my Gen Zer
Cool.
assistant. What's up? Help me out with a lot of these things. All right, so what we're gonna do, let's grab our onion.
I cheated.
Oh, good, you already peeled it.
Yeah.
Okay, so mise en place, right? We talked about that a little bit, but it's important. So that's what I do, cut off both ends.
Yeah.
Part of my mise en place usually is I have a discard bin. Now, what you do with that discard bin is kind of your personal preference. If you're a gardener, maybe it's your compost pile. If you're going to make stock, maybe it's your stock pile. But you want to make sure you have a discard pile just because it just keeps your station clean, right? And when we're talking about our station, this is where a lot of people kind of get overwhelmed and maybe like have trouble multitasking. It starts with what we call mise en place, which means everything in its place.
Right.
So I like to compare it to like a vehicle. So I like my station to be set up like a car, right? So I know my steering wheel is here. I know my shift is here. I know my blinkers here, and everything has a place and it makes sense. Now in the home kitchen, that's not as important as like in a restaurant setting, but if you're having a lot of people over and you're gonna cook for, I don't know, 20 people at your winery or something is happening like that, because you really want to start doing things like that, which you might want to do. You want to make sure your station makes sense, right? So you have your cutting board in a central location that's makes sense for your setup. You have a towel. I always fold my towel. You never want to have a towel just wadded up on a station. It's not how you do it, right? You want everything organized, neat, orderly, because that's what's going to set you up for success. So for this, I've got my towel here. I've got my pot ready to go. I have some of my vegetables already pre-washed and ready to go. So for this soup and for your soup, we're going to cut the onion in a julienne. So the reason why we're cutting in a julienne instead of a dice is because we want to give the onions time to sweat down without browning. If we cut the onion really small and throw it into our pot, they're going to get brown on us really quickly. And this is a way that we can actually put our onions in the pot and not worry that they're going to get burned, right? So we're going to do a julienne. So you're just going to kind of go with your onion like this. You kind of flip it over. And now you end up with these nice julienne.
Your iPhone is doing something. Jessica, is it connecting?
Yeah. So I'm going to use that as another angle.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to use the camera on the phone for another angle.
Yeah.
But thanks for the warning. Can you see this okay?
What's up?
Can you see this okay?
Yeah, I can see that all right. So you just cut it one way. That's julienne.
Julienne. So julienne is great for pickling. So if you're going to do pickled red onions, cut it julienne. If you're going to do caramelized onions, you want to cut it julienne.
Okay.
For the soup, we're going to cut it that way because we don't want our onions to get away from us while we do other things. We don't want them to get too brown. And cutting it like this has more surface area. Remember, you have to, okay, yeah. We're figuring out. We're kind of like high tech, low tech.
Sure.
All right, so my julienne onion, I'm only going to do half an onion for my soup. And you can choose to do that too. If you really like onions, you want your soup nice and sweet, you know, go ahead and julienne the whole thing. I'm going to turn you up a little bit so I can hear you better. Okay. All right, so I turned on my pot. My pot is getting nice and warm over here, so turn on your pot if it's not already.
And like medium high?
Medium, good solid medium.
Okay. I hope you have a gas stove at home.
I do.
We have an electric one in this apartment. I've always hated electric stoves.
Well, you know, they are actually a lot more efficient and energy efficient and better for the environment, but I do appreciate the primal flame, you know.
Yeah.
It's important.
And it's like a better visual, I mean, for me.
For sure. Okay, so you have your julienne onion. We're gonna go ahead and dump that in the pot. So I like to have a cutting board that I can just kind of carry straight over to my pot and then just scoop it in there.
And you obviously put some oil in there?
I did put some oil. I'm using just plain olive oil, not extra virgin olive oil, but plain olive oil. Okay, perfect. So now that I have my julienne onion in my pot, I'm gonna get on my wooden spoon. I always prefer to work with a wooden spoon. And I'm gonna put salt on these onions. That's a really important step. So I'm just gonna put just a little pinch, maybe a teaspoon of salt onto my onions as they are sweating. What that's going to do is prevent the onions from browning, and it's going to aid in the sweating process and really soften the onions.
So you said like half a teaspoon? I mean, a healthy pinch, right?
Yeah, healthy pinch. Yep.
And stir it around like?
Yeah, just kind of stir it around. And then at this point, you can kind of just like turn the heat down. Want to get it to like now a medium low with the salt on there. You're going to just let it sweat. You're going to let those onions kind of get clear and just really soft. And while that's happening, we're going to cut our other vegetables that are going to go in there. So I know that my onions aren't going to burn now. They're protected. The salt is making them release more juices, which is going to help them sweat. All right, so in my soup, I'm going to use a little bit of celery root because I have it and I really love the flavor of it. Again, I'm kind of cutting it in bigger pieces because I really don't need to cut it really small because I'm going to end up pureeing the soup. But if you were, say, doing this soup where you wanted to have, you know, the chunks of the vegetable, this is where I would do like a small dice, right? And so I would take the celery root, and I would first cut myself a flat surface. So that's important. You don't want to have something, you know, rolling around on your cutting board, kind of unsafe. That's like the big thing. And so when you're cutting kind of harder vegetables like celery root, carrots, that kind of thing, you want to cut yourself a little flat spot. So just a tiny little flat spot, then you have a nice flat base to work with. And then I'm going to do just a small dice. right? So I cut in half, doing like that. I try to keep all my pieces together like that, nice and organized, so that my dice comes out cleaner. Because if I were to like dice it and then let these guys do this, like kind of go all over my cutting board, then I'm gonna end up with like a whole bunch of different size pieces, like even more than I would if I had to just like keep them nicely stacked together. So I'm gonna do that, and this is basically a rustic kind of small dice. So for you, we're gonna take the celery that you have on hand. Yep.
It's like 2 stalks or something.
Yeah, 2 stalks is good. Celery has a really strong flavor, and I think oftentimes people will sort of underestimate the power of celery. Like it's very powerful, and it will take over if you let it. So if you like that kind of thing, that's your choice. That's your signature. But for me, I like celery to be sort of a background thing, you know. So
Maybe 1 stalk, or I mean,
sure, if it's big, you know, 1 stalk is fine.
this guy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's perfect. So cut that guy in half.
Like length down this long ways.
No, cut it in half widthwise first.
Middle.
Yeah, middle. That way you have an easier chunk to work with. Now I just want you to, you know, break it down into manageable slices, right? So now you can split it down the middle now that you've had it halved. All right. So then for me, since I'm going to puree my soup and I want this to kind of sweat slowly and not brown on me super fast, I'm going to do kind of larger slices like this. And I'm doing it just a little bit at an angle because I like that. And it also creates more surface area, which will actually make the vegetable cook faster. So rather than cutting things in big chunks that have small like edges, you want to do something like this where it's a nice amount of celery, but you expose a lot of surface area.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I wonder if I can like raise my computer so you can see what I'm doing.
Sure.
I don't really.
Yeah, whatever you need to do. That's great.
I don't know how I could get it high enough.
Sometimes what I do is I stack it on some books and then
Yeah, no, I just to get it so you could actually. I mean, I don't know if actually I can reasonably do it. Okay, well, I'll just do my best.
Okay. Well, yeah, so just follow along the best you can. And like I said, this is gonna be recorded, so you can go back and really focus and look at like exactly what I'm doing, you know. And if you ever want to just pause and just kind of see what I'm doing more closely, that's fine. All right,
Okay.
so my celery, I'm gonna put it in my pot. I'm gonna get it sweating with my onions. So right now we're just layering in the first levels of flavor. So we're starting with our foundation, which is going to be our celery and onion, or our mirepoix, if you will, without carrot. And at this point, we kind of want to check on it. We want to make sure it is sweating. If you do need to add a little bit more oil, add more oil. If your pan's looking a little dry, you can do that. I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit. So I have this sweating. And then another thing that is really important to do is to take your spices that you're going to be adding into your soup. And this is the time where you put them in, actually. It's not at the end. It may be a little bit at the end, but really we're layering it in the beginning. For my soup, I'm going to use just some fennel, but for you, I think you have coriander, cinnamon.
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to take your coriander and cinnamon and you're going to add it into this saute.
Okay. And does it matter? Is whole coriander fine? You know, not ground, whole berries.
Just crush it with your knife.
Okay. And it was about a teaspoon, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, just give it a little crush. And I personally love whole coriander seeds. Like, I don't mind that. I would love to eat a soup that had like little bits of coriander
Right.
in it. I mean, that I think that's delicious. So the reason why we add spices in this stage is so that we wake them up. So we get them activated and we get them out of the can or out of the box or out of the bottle that they were in. Because if we just dump spices on the top of our soup at the end, those spices aren't going to really reach their true potential. Whereas
Right.
if we do it now in this saute, they have time to kind of get with the other ingredients and really wake up and become very aromatic and even slightly toasted. You can toast your spices, you know, at the end and then add them in, and that will kind of wake them up a little bit, but then it's an extra step, you know, that you're doing after the fact, which is kind of inefficient. And then it's not as melded with your base.
Yeah, let's see. Should I throw in the chili flakes too, it says?
Yes, chili flakes. All your spices, anything dry spices. Can I get the camera angle? What? Technical difficulties. All right, I am turning up my heat. So I'm just adding in my my leeks right now because they cook pretty fast. They sweat down really fast, so I want them, you know, in this stage. For you, you're going to keep doing your spices and just keep that stuff toasting. And you have your squash. And did you pre-roast?
Yeah.
Okay. And kind of mash it up a little bit?
I haven't mashed it up or anything. It's just roasted on a sheet right now.
Okay. So yeah, let's take out the squash. Let's scoop out the meat into a small bowl. If you have one handy.
Yes, I do.
Great. Now, your starchy vegetable is squash. My starchy vegetable is potato. The reason why we add the starchy vegetables later after the saute is because, well, they're starchy and they'll get in there. They'll start to kind of stick to the bottom of the pan, and they're also going to inhibit the release of the liquid because they're going to absorb the liquid rather than letting these onions sweat down and release their liquid. You put that starchy vegetable in there, it's going to suck it all up and then start burning in your pot. You don't want that. So that's why we do it last step.
So don't put in the squash?
Don't put the squash into the pot yet.
Just put it in the bowl.
Yes.
And take the skin off?
Yeah, take the skin off. Yeah.
And am I using an entire squash?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, do that.
You still want me to do that? Huh? You still want me to do that? Yeah. Okay, so your squash. We've got our sauteed veg happening. You can kind of see into my pot what's going on. I've got some nice onions here that are getting really soft. Things are looking pretty good, and they're almost ready to start adding my liquids. Now, the liquids that we have could be different. I chose just a cheap Sauv Blanc because I don't really drink white wine, and so I don't invest in it. I do drink white natural wine sometimes. It's delicious, but For cooking, I never use anything that's boxed or like the cooking wine because that stuff is gross. And you should never cook with a wine that you wouldn't, consume.
Right.
And if you wouldn't want to cook with an expensive wine either, because that would just be a sad waste of wine, in my opinion.
Middle of the roader.
Middle of the roader, something in the like $8 to $9 range, maybe even $6 is okay. But yeah, I wouldn't go extravagant on the wine because you're just gonna lose it, But at this stage, you could choose anything. Like you could use sour beer, for example. You could use like a saison, maybe that you forgot about in your fridge. It's sitting there.
I have a old stale sour beer in the fridge as well as an old stale Sauvignon Blanc, but also the bone broth. Was I supposed to?
Perfect. So get your old sour beer. Get
Okay.
let's go with sour beer. I think that sounds really good. So let's do that.
So I'm pouring that into my onions. I'm just
Will.
things off of the squash still.
Okay.
But my onions are probably getting pretty soft at this point.
Yeah. So
Okay.
now what you can do is walk away from your squash. You're gonna put in about a cup of your saison or whatever, your sour beer, your liquid. You're gonna put that in there. I'm gonna do Sauv Blanc. And you can see it's kind of pulling up the bits on the bottom of the pan. This is what we call deglazing.
Right.
All
Oh,
right.
did you turn the heat up?
I am going to dump it in, and then I'm going to turn the heat up. Yes.
Okay.
So I've got about a cup in here, give or take. I turn my heat up because what I want this to do is reduce and concentrate. Each time I'm adding something, I want it to, wake up and then reduce and concentrate because that's what's going to give us that really beautiful flavor base to then introduce our stock at the very end.
This is gonna be a fancy ass soup. This is a fancy beer which I never even really drank.
Nice.
Because honestly, I don't even really like it that much. But DeGard Brewery?
I don't know that one. No.
They're kind of cool. They're up in Tillamook in Oregon.
Nice.
And kind of along like the naturalistic path. They like their MO is it's all like spontaneous fermented beers.
Love that.
They're pretty much all sour. And this one was aged in oak gin barrels for 2 years with lavender flowers, and it was like $20-some, and I didn't even drink it, but whatever.
Wow. Nice. All right. So we've got our stuff reducing. Mine is about 1/3 reduced at this time. I'm gonna let it go just a little bit longer. And then I'm gonna take my cream,
Okay.
and I'm gonna add my cream in just a second. I want this to reduce just a little bit longer, maybe like 30 more seconds. I want to see some concentration. I want to see a little bit less liquid, about half as much liquid as I added. So we're going to reduce it. We pulled all those flavors off the bottom of the pot. We're now creating a flavorful juice with our spices. Everything's really concentrated and flavorful. And then we're going to add our cream. And our cream also needs to reduce. If we don't reduce our cream, it's possible that we're going to end up with a soup that has sort of like curdled bits or split or broken and not like the thickness we want it to be. Also, cream has flavor. And in this box, it's been sitting for we don't know how long, probably a while. And that box flavor, believe it or not, is going to be in this cream. If we don't cook that out, by reducing it and cooking it out, we're going to kind of have that weird like boxed cream taste. And I do the same exact thing with tomato paste. Tomato paste is a really, really important thing. If you're going to use it, you do it with the spices. You put it in, like you toast your spices a little bit, and then you add your tomato paste because you want to cook out that can or boxed flavor.
Okay.
Yeah. So, got my cream. Letting it get, and at this point, I've got my cream kind of reducing. This is when I'm going to add almost, when I let it go just a little bit longer, then I'm going to add in my starchy vegetable.
Okay.
And in your case, it's squash. In my case, it's going to be potatoes. And one way that I can tell when it's ready is like when you first put it in here, the bubbles are really small. They're moving really, really fast. And as it reduces, the bubbles get larger and they move slower. That's one way you can tell.
Yeah, because I don't know if I put in maybe too much beer. I mean, I used a measuring cup. I did about a cup, but I think that was maybe a bit much.
That's fine. That's fine. We'll just keep, you know, just make sure you reduce it a little bit more, and then you can add your cream in and then keep that reducing. But once you add your starch, it's going to be absorbed, right? So you're not going to end up with a watery soup, and it's still going to be flavorful.
And then how much cream am I adding about?
So I added maybe about a half a cup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does it matter that my celery is still hard at this point?
Not at all.
Okay.
All right. So my cream is getting nice and reduced. I was going to mention it. So I'm going to add my potatoes in right now. I cut them down just a little bit so they cook faster. I've also kind of pre-cooked them. Just a little bit, just to soften them just for the class. But if you don't have to pre-cook your potatoes at this step. You can throw in, you know, just raw potatoes and it'll be totally fine. You're just gonna let it simmer until they're done. But at this point, we've created that really nice flavor base. That's what we've done so far. And from here, it's now just a matter of kind of finishing and just adding our stock. And then once we let that simmer for a little bit, you can either, you know, let this cool and then use your blender later.
Mm-hmm.
You're just gonna kind of mash it up a little bit, and then you're gonna have some nice like texture to your soup. And there's nothing wrong with that. Texture is interesting.
A little more rustic.
More rustic, exactly. All right. I've got that going on. My cream is definitely getting reduced. It's even changing color a little bit. It's getting kind of beigey. I have my potatoes going in. I'm gonna throw all these guys in here. I love potato leek soup. It's one of my favorite things. All right, so in they go, in they go. Now, this is the part. So we really gave this a lot of attention. But we could have walked away in various parts of that, right? In various parts, we could have gone off and done something else and it would have been fine. But this is the part where we're gonna put everything in, all of our starchy stuff, and then we're gonna top it off with our stock, our bone broth. So I've got my starchy vegetables in. Now I'm gonna stop that reduction. Nothing else is gonna reduce anymore. Now I'm just bringing it to a boil. Always kind of salt it a little bit after I add the stock, just because I know it's going to need it. And I like to salt throughout the process rather than all at the very end or all at the very beginning. It's good to build salt over time because you can always add, but you can't really take away. And it's just good to be tasting and making sure your salt level is, you know, being changed throughout the cooking process. All right. So for time purposes, I like to just put a lid on it and just let it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it to a boil, reduce to a simmer, and pretty much do that every time I do anything with either braising, making a soup, bring to a boil, reduce to a simmer, and we're going to simmer this for, you know, not that long, probably 10-ish minutes or so. And at that point, you can take your herbs. So whichever herbs you want to use, I suggested thyme and you know, maybe some sage, some rosemary. I have a little bit of thyme and rosemary here. I'm going to be really careful with my rosemary and actually use it as a garnish because it's really strong. So I'm actually going to fry it too, which mellows it out. So I'm going to take my time, and rather than using kitchen twine, I like to just take one of the thyme, whatever, the stems, and kind of tie up my thyme with it. And I'm just gonna go ahead and plop that on the top of my soup. And what that's gonna be like is kind of like a tea. Like I'm making a little herb tea at the top of my soup, and I'm gonna remove that at the end. So I don't end up blending it in a blender or I mean, having it in someone's bowl, or they get a whole bunch of twigs in their bowl. It's not generally too appetizing. All right. So any questions so far about anything that we talked about?
A bone broth in there, but it's quite a bit of squash, but it's soupy.
Okay.
But yeah, everything's fine.
Okay, good.
Nothing's on fire.
Nothing's on fire. Okay, good. So I like to think of ingredients again like it's a story, right? So you choose ingredients that, first of all, make sense together. So, you know, whether it be from a cultural reference or a seasonal reference, we just want to make sure that we're telling a cohesive story. You wouldn't want to put, say, tomatoes with, I mean, you can actually do this, put tomatoes like winter squash. I'm trying to think like what's the opposite of a tomato in a vegetable setting. Like you just kind of want to tell a seasonal story, right? And choose those ingredients that match.
Things like grow together, go together, right?
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly right. And with your flavorful liquids too, you could even choose a stock. Say if you're making a corn chowder, for example, I like to actually take corn cobs that I've cut the corn off, put them in a pot with my onions and celery, and make like a corn broth with the cobs, right? And then I use that as my flavorful liquid, my stock to make my corn soup, and it just fortifies that flavor and then carries that theme all the way through.
Cool. I'm gonna go grab thyme. I'll be right back.
Grab thyme.
In the garden.
Man, there's a key point that I was going to tell him that I completely forgot. Almost there. Did you know what we're having for dinner? Did you know what we're having for dinner? Potato soup. You guessed it. Damn, what was it? Oh, can you check out on the front porch and see if my stickers showed up? I think they might.
Yeah, I think I heard something.
All right, you've got time. You've got time. I've been thinking a lot about time lately, and I was listening to this podcast where it talks about the difference between investing your time versus spending your time, right? And I think this is a perfect example of, you know, we could be watching TV right now, or like, I don't know, just hanging out, doing nothing, but we're both, you know, taking this time and really investing in, you know, our skill set, which I think is a really great investment in time. So I really appreciate you investing your time with me today in the kitchen. And, you know, this time is yours too. Any questions that you have, even if it's not about the soup, stuff that's just going through your mind, you know, like you have your fridge there and you're like, hey, I got this, I don't know what to do with it. I mean, that saison, for example, we're making good use of it. Since you're, oh yay, my sticker shut up. Since you're not gonna drink it. You could also, for this soup, you know, that you're making, which would be nice, would, you know, include apples, right? You could do apples. You could do some quince even if you wanted to. That could be kind of interesting. You could do curry. You could do curry powder and kind of do like a red, like curry squash kind of soup. You could do, instead of the cream, instead of the heavy cream, you could take coconut milk. But you do the same thing. The process remains the same. The ingredients tell different stories, but the process will be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're simmering. My
Yep.
soup is probably going to take a little while, and I'm going to end up blending it. One thing that's really important to remember too with your soup, every single soup, every single time, I don't care who it is or what they're making, you finish the soup with acid. You want to finish the soup with some kind of acid that makes sense in your story. So if you're making a corn chowder, for example, I might choose lime as a finishing acid. In your soup, I'm going to go with an apple cider vinegar. This is a really nice apple cider vinegar. It's made by Pineapple Collaborative. I don't know, my friend Amber, who owns Mountainside Made, gave it to me. She sells it in her shop.
Cool.
It's pretty good stuff. So you could also use, like in my soup, I want to keep it like pretty white and pretty, you know, clean flavors. So I'm going to use a white balsamic to finish my soup with. But what we're doing is we're taking our soup, all that base that we created, we're tasting it, you know, and you're going to taste it before you add the acid. And you're just looking for balance, right? Our tongue is made of like the sweet, salty, sour, bitter. And then there's the fifth one, umami, right? But you know what creates umami is balance. That's where umami comes from. If a dish is either too salty, there's too much salt, or too much acid, the balance is going to be off and you're not going to get that satiated umami kind of flavor. So yeah, let's taste our soups. Now at this point, you start making decisions. This is where your signature comes in. This is where your personal preferences come in, your taste. You know, this is on you. This is on the chef, the creator, you know, to decide what it needs. And I'd say 10 out of 10 times, it needs salt and acid.
Yeah, definitely sort of salt.
All right, so you put some salt in there. Add a little bit of salt in mine. And I'm gonna wait to do the acid. But I just wanted to make sure you caught that part because that's a really important part of finishing a soup. And using the applicable acid. Same thing with like a braise. Like if you're doing like braised short ribs for a long period of time, you take it out and taste it, you adjust the seasoning, you may add a little more pepper. And actually on the subject of pepper, you'll notice I didn't put it in a recipe as a spice. Pepper is, again, a very it's an overutilized spice that is, you know, underestimated. And pepper is oils, that has oils in it, right? So it actually will build over time. You add it into your soup in the early beginning. By the end of the cooking process, you're just gonna taste pepper. You're gonna taste black pepper. And it's not ideal, right? So I treat pepper as a finishing tool, just like extra virgin olive oil, just like flaky sea salt. You know, it's at the end. I usually leave it to the diner's, you know, preference. Like here's a pepper grinder, you want to put pepper on there. That's, you know, and it also does tend to, especially if you add it in the early process with the soup, for example, look dirty. You know, it kind of just makes your food look a little bit dirty and it's not very photogenic, say, or, you know, appealing to the eye. So I don't like to put pepper in stuff unless it's really, really necessary and it's part of the story. And this, I just don't feel, I don't like pepper that much, I guess, but you know, it's a powerful tool. And I just want you to be aware of that it does build over time.
Cool.
I actually learned that from David Kinch. I was watching the amazing, I think it's In the Mind of a Chef. Not his chef's table, but in the mind of a chef. He's cooking on the beach with this guy, and they're like getting like seawater and putting it in a cauldron and boiling it on the shore, you know, and he talks about pepper, and it was really pretty poetic, but I wholeheartedly agreed with him.
Cool.
All right. Now, since I have, let's see, potatoes here, I'm gonna take my stick blender and are you able to log in still? You're just about at the time to finish. So usually after I've added my my stock, I would say it's about 20 minutes. You know, roughly 10 to 20 minutes to get it to, you know, everything's soft, everything's cooked, everything's ready to go to either blend or serve in your case. I'm going to blend mine. Let's see if that. Important step with blending. Please never put super hot liquid in your blender. You will be sorry, okay? Let it cool down a little bit. Really, really important. Don't overfill your blender. Don't fill it more than halfway. You're gonna blend in batches. You do not want to put hot stuff in a blender. It's gonna activate more heat molecules and it's gonna explode on you. I've had that happen. Unfortunately, in the kitchen with one of my interns, I burned him really badly one time. Terrible. All right, I removed my little bundle. Okay, check this out. Just make sure I'm not getting twigs in there. I'm just gonna go ahead and put this immersion blender in here. Kind of work it around. You see, this is a really simple, easy kind of thing. You can also kind of customize how coarse you want it. So sometimes like I'll reserve some stuff on the side. And so I have chunks within my puree because I don't always want to eat like baby food kind of, you know, textured soup. So I'll take it, like scoop out about half of it or a third of it sometimes and have like those bigger pieces, and then I'll puree the rest and then add it back in. But for this, I'm just going to kind of do a rough pulse. Like, it's not even blended all the way, but we have a really nice, like, thick soup. Not too thick, not too thin. I'm gonna burn my daughter. So, really careful with this. Now you can make thickness adjustments. One of the cool things about, you know, the fact that we built that incredible flavor base getting to this point, we can actually add water to this and it's not really going to mess it up. We can add a little bit of water. We can readjust the salt and acid, you know, to bring it back to balance. But that's a, you know, part of making a really nice flavorful concentrated soup is it gives you flexibility in the texture and the final product. So for me, I'm going to add a little bit of water, just like maybe, I don't know, like half a cup. I'm going to add a little bit of water, and I can add cream at this time as long as I'm not going to be cooking this for a really long time. I can finish it with a little bit of cream. So I'm going to do that because I have it and might as well not waste it, or, you know, so I'm going to finish with a little bit of cream. But just finish. Don't cook this out crazy because it's going to curdle. It's going to get weird. It's going to separate. It's not ideal. So I have this kind of like rustic sort of, you know, potato leek soup right here. And I'm going to take my white balsamic and I'm going to put in probably, usually I find it's about roughly 2 tablespoons that it takes to bring it to balance. This just comes with like a lot of doing it. But I start with a tablespoon and then kind of go from there. So you'll put your acid in there, whichever one you chose for your story. A little bit of salt. And then I'm going to make sure that I taste it again. And that's balanced. It's really hot.
Yeah, I feel like I burn my tongue often just tasting things, and it's always a mistake.
Yeah. And it makes it hard to taste it after the fact, after you burn it. So I tasted it. You know, my chef brain says I need a little bit more balance. I need a little bit more acid. So I went ahead and added about another tablespoon. Again, you want to like make sure you don't overdo it from the beginning because you can always build, but you can't take away, right? So what the last thing we want is to like dump a ton of vinegar. You don't want to taste the vinegar. The vinegar is not there to be tasted. It's definitely behind the scenes, okay? So it's a behind the scenes tool that is going to bring your food to a balanced place. We don't want to be tasting like a bowl of apple cider vinegar soup, you know? Yeah. All right, I'm gonna turn on my oil back here. Oh, I did.
Healthy as that may be.
Yeah, I actually use apple cider vinegar a lot in a lot of different ways. I wash my hair with it. All right, I'm turning this off. I have some oil that I've been heating up back here because I'm going to do a little fried rosemary for my soup as a garnish. And this is the fun part with soup too, is like after you've made the puree, after you've made your flavorful, you know, soup base, you can get really creative with toppings. Like I like to actually put arugula in my soup. So like I'll make potato leek soup, and then when I'm serving it, I'll put like a little nest of arugula on top. I'll add a little crushed sea salt to that. I'll put some like, you know, extra virgin olive oil on there, and it's kind of stay over here. So it's really nice. So I've got my little bowl here. Something in my throat. Right. Now, when serving or plating soup, I like a pretty deep bowl, and you're not going to want to fill it more than like 2/3 or half, even like that. Okay, let's go over here to where it's prettier. Here. All right. So for the plating part, I'm going to take my rosemary. I'm going to fry it for just a second. And with your sage, same thing. You can fry your sage in oil, or I like to do a little bit of butter, get it kind of brown, get the butter kind of toasty, add a little bit of olive oil to protect it from burning. Then you're gonna add in your sage and just kind of lightly fry it a little bit. And then that sage leaf becomes nice and crispy and can go on top of your soup. All right, so I have some fried rosemary here. And I kind of, it's a little bit hot, but I've got chef fingers. Just gonna kind of sprinkle it on top. Nice little fried rosemary action. And then I don't have any arugula, unfortunately. I wish I did. But I'm just gonna do some extra virgin olive oil. Now there's so many different kinds. You can really get creative with, the finishing process. You could add a savory granola topping. You could add a sort of interesting spiced creme fraiche. You could do, like I said, like a green, like arugula. You could do sauteed radicchio. You could do a slaw of radicchio, you know, just kind of julienne it up and put it on there. It would be delicious. You could do an infused oil, like a smoked paprika oil or coriander oil. Take those coriander pods that you have there and kind of, you know, wake them up with a little bit, kind of fry them, and then just garnish with some fried coriander pods on top. But I'm just going to go ahead and just do olive oil. Ooh. And then, you know, that's it. And any soup really should be made in this way with these steps. And, you know, you can just swap out the ingredients depending on your dietary preference. If you don't drink or you don't have beer around, of course, you can use something like juice. Juice is a good one. Or with the cream, same thing. You can omit the cream and do almond milk or, you know, coconut milk or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was worried that the cinnamon was gonna be overpowering because it smelled so strong in the early stage, but it's fine.
Nice.
And yeah, I have already learned. This is probably the best tasting soup I've made.
Nice. All right, I'm gonna disconnect. Yeah, I definitely know what we're gonna eat for dinner. It's potato leek soup.
Yeah.
I also like rustic breadcrumbs, you know, like take a old piece of baguette and kind of tear it with your hands, toss it in a little olive oil, and then just toast that in your oven. And that could be like a rustic crouton that goes on top of your soup. What are some other garnishes that you can think of for your soup?
I mean, yeah, toasted seeds, the oils, just cream. I mean, even sour cream in soups is hella good.
It is, definitely. But we want to take it kind of one step further, right? Like sour cream in a soup, yeah, it's good. But like, how could we elevate that? So sour cream with that's
Lemon zest or something.
lemon zest, or you could do like chipotle powder in it or something like
Right.
that, or chili powder. Or you could take like a chili puree. Say you have some dried chilies, you have some guajillos or something in your kitchen. You kind of roast those up and puree them, and then you mix that with your sour cream, and then that becomes your garnish.
Yes.
Yes, that's kind of those are the steps that kind of take us from what I call civilians
Right.
to the next level, right?
Right.
Which is what we're trying to do here.
Totally.
So yeah, let's plan on, do you have any further questions about today's session?
Not immediately. Like I said, I did learn some things like getting, I don't know, just the spices that were used to create the flavor-based concept was a good one that I never really occurred to me, nor had anyone ever taught me that.
Yeah, it's
and yeah, I don't know, just like meal inspiration ideas. That's just another hard one. Like, I don't know. Some people are good with cookbooks. Maybe I need some good cookbooks, but
yeah, I like to, I buy cookbooks from my favorite restaurants, and what you'll find in those types of cookbooks a lot of times, again, it's about the story, and then you're reading for the technique. I'm always reading for the technique first because that's where I'm going to learn what I need to do. And then that's like what's in your heart, what you are creative about, like what's inspiring you. I usually don't make a shopping list when I go to the store, which is probably why my food cost is so high because I go to the store and I wander around and I just kind of get inspired, or I go to the farmer's market and, wander around and get inspired. I think that's where it starts. It really starts with just opening yourself up to the idea of not using a recipe.
right.
Because a recipe, again, is just someone else's story. And we want to hear what James has to say, and the techniques, though, are there because there's just a scientific way and an efficient way to do things. And, we've been doing this for hundreds of years, so some things have been figured out for us. But as far as our personal taste goes, that's up to you. So, yeah, I challenge you, this week to create a new soup, right? Using this method.
Yeah.
Create a new soup with a different set of ingredients. And again, feel free to reach out to me if you have questions after the session and you're like, hey, I was thinking about something, like, can you, I'll be here to answer your questions. No worries. Okay. So just, can stay in contact. If you have any questions, I'm actually going to stop recording.